Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we're on the website of Sunrise Auctions based in Japan, and we're going to have a look at their latest auction, which is basically bowed stringed instruments and associated things. So this particular auction is finishing on the 10th and 11th of April. It's the 27th of March today, so quite a few days left to go. I'll put a link to the video in the description. About 66 or so, is it? Lots, I can't quite remember. Yeah, 66 lots on this, so not a particularly big sale. Looks like the standard buyer's premium is about 17%. It goes a bit down over a certain kind of price threshold, but there are other charges as well, and it gets a bit complicated. So I think you're looking at somewhere around 20% or over for a buyer's premium. So this is an auction based in Japan, so bear that in mind if you're looking to buy something. Import, export, fees, shipping, maybe CITES, all of that fun stuff. Before we get onto it, just like to say, if you do enjoy these videos, please consider subscribing, like, comment, turn on notifications, all of that fun stuff. So yeah, what to say about this auction? I've had a quick look over it, and I have to say there are a few new things and a few things which we've seen before, but the general standard unfortunately is kind of dropped a little bit, and it was like this before and then it picked up a bit on Sunrise, but unfortunately this particular auction not the greatest. However, let's cover it anyway, just so we can see what's going on, and hopefully the next one will be a bit better. So we've got this Jalovec book that we always see every time, so nothing too crazy there. Violin stand, not particularly interesting. Got a chin rest as well, that's kind of curious. Another chin rest, so we can just ignore that stuff. Got a 3/4 violin, it's not really anything super exciting going on here, so I don't think it's anything of note. 10 to 15,000 yen on that. 3/4 Czech violin with a Strad label once again, nothing really super exciting here. Another 3/4 violin labelled Mark Nikirkin, same thing, not really interesting. Nickel mounted cello, let's see here. This again doesn't look too crazy. 10 to 15,000 yen on that. Nickel and ebony mounted German cello bow, stamped Seifert, 20 to 30,000 yen on that. Silver mounted cello bow, possibly English, okay. 150 to 200,000 yen they want on that. This looks kind of fairly interesting. Some of the detail on that. 72 grams with hair, okay. Silver mounted cello bow stamped Amati Marjano, 150 to 200,000 yen on that. And a cello, 10 to 15,000 yen. Which is not super high in terms of value, but I think this is just not really great stuff. Same here, another cello, 30 to 50,000 yen. I think roughly if you halve that number and kind of change the way that the digits are, I think this is about 150 to 250 pounds. I think that is roughly the kind of exchange rate, so it's nothing too outrageous at this level. Silver and ebony mounted German viola or violin bow, stamped Seifert, 64.7 grams, so it's like right in the middle of the weight thing, so I think they're right to kind of call that. If you're around that 64-65 grams, I think you should just let people make up their own mind if it's a viola or a violin bow, so I agree with that. Contemporary viola, labelled J.H. Müller, Germany, 2010, 30 to 50,000 on that. It's got nothing too crazy. Contemporary German viola, labelled and made in the firm of Karl Hofner, Germany, 42.60 on that. Once again, nothing super crazy. Some violin bows, 1,500 to 2,000 yen on that. Nickel and ebony mounted violin or viola bow, stamped KK Shimura. Doesn't look super interesting. Silver and ebony mounted German violin bow, head repaired. Nickel and ebony mounted German bow, German violin bow, 8 to 10 on that. A bit of a wobbly adjuster there. Just say all these first lots so far, they're finishing on the 10th of April. Then the ones towards the end, the higher level ones, are finishing on the 11th. So just to be kind of clear about that. Nickel and ebony mounted violin bow. Another nickel and ebony mounted German violin bow. 10 to 15,000 yen there. The German violin bow here. Again, not seeing anything super interesting. Nickel and ebony mounted Violin setting frog violin bow. Violin bow here. These are really common, these type of bows. I've had some before, not very interesting to be honest. They're just more to look fancy than anything. Nickel and ebony mounted, I think that's meant to be ironwood violin bow there, 10 to 15. Silver and ebony mounted violin bow, possibly English, head repaired, 10 to 15,000 yen there. 5 violin bows, 20 to 30,000 yen on that. Violin bow stamped El Morazon, head repaired. You can kind of see that. Bit of a head repair there. I think they do need to work on their pictures a bit. The photos are a bit washed out. 30 to 50,000 yen. So here we can see Sunrise endangered species policy. I don't think they used to have that before actually, which I thought was a bit surprising. So obviously they do now, so something's happened. Silver mounted old violin bow, not stamped. 120 to 150,000 there, so getting a bit higher. So I think that's about £600 to kind of £750 or so. I think maybe I'll just double check that on Xe or something like that. Yeah, I just took a bit of a jump cut there. Yeah, it's about £600, so 600 kind of £750 or so is the estimate there, so a little bit higher level. We're still on April the 10th lot, so we haven't moved on to the ones on the 11th. Silver mounted French violin bow by Maison Frère, Mircourt, circa 1950, so 500,000 to 800,000 there. So we're on basically, yeah, I think that's possibly 2,500 to kind of 4,000, I think, something like that. So it's got a Raffin certificate as well, so that's kind of good. Silver mounted French violin bow by Nicolas Francois Vorin, Paris, circa 1875 Viome model, 2.5 million to 3 million yen. So we're getting into kind of a fair territory there. So I think we're kind of looking around the 12 to 15,000 pounds. The estimate there. It's got a Raffin certificate as well. I mean, some of the bows actually in this auction are fine. German violin. So on the 11th of April now, this has been stripped of its varnish. 1,000 to 150, 1,000 to 1,500 yen. Sorry, I mean this is just a real basket case kind of instrument. I would question why it's even in the auction, to be honest. Violin. Once again, this is the lowest kind of tier of like child trade instrument there, so not even worth looking at. Chinese violin labelled Piccolini, Just looks very standard and not even necessarily a higher grade of Chinese violin either. 5,000 to 8,000 yen on that. A violin, once again, pretty much the lowest of the low. Violin getting mildly better, but not a whole lot better, sadly. 5,000 to 8,000 yen on that. Japanese violin labelled Kiso violin, 1994. Once again, a pretty low end kind of thing here. A Czech violin labelled Stradivari, 10 to 15,000 on that. Once again, nothing too crazy. Chinese violin labelled Scott and Guan. Looks slightly better in quality there, 10 to 15,000. Nothing super exciting though. A violin, 10 to 15,000. Once again, looks like it is probably a Chinese violin of some kind. A violin again. Slightly more interesting on the scroll, 10 to 15,000. Still nothing super crazy. Another violin. This one I think almost certainly a Chinese violin, 10 to 15,000. So nothing too crazy. The estimates are not high either, so you know it's fair enough. It's just not particularly exciting. This once again looks like a fairly standard kind of trade instrument, a little bit higher on the estimate there. Another violin, another similar kind of trade violin, 20 to 30. German violin labelled made in the firm of Erich Werner, 1997. Once again, a kind of lower level kind of student trade instrument, slightly better than some of the other stuff here, 20 to 30,000. Violin labelled Karl Hofner, violin there, 20 to 30. Not a particularly nice one. They do make some quite nice ones, but that one a lower tier one. Violin labelled Strad. So far a little bit disappointing, to be honest. German violin labelled Strad in a bit of a state of disrepair. German violin labelled Giuseppe Salvadore in Pistoia, 1863. I mean, mildly more interesting than what we've seen before. Kind of scrollers, a bit more curious. Length of back 358. Still don't think it's anything much more than a trade violin, 30 to 50,000 yen on that. Contemporary German violin, made in the firm of Karl Hopfner. This is a slightly better model than the other ones that we've seen, but not super high level. Contemporary violin labelled Vincenzo Postiglione. This just looks like a kind of trade violin that's been messed around a bit, but the estimate is fair. It's kind of keeping that. One of our long-term instruments that we always see here, this violin labelled Francesco Guadagnini, 50 to 70,000 yen. I've not really been tracking the price, the estimate, but I'm sure it's probably been going down. Once again, doesn't look like anything other than a standard kind of trade instrument. Modern violin labelled Stradivarius. So I don't think it's anything particularly interesting in this. Let's look at the picture a bit bigger. It doesn't look like anything of particular note. Violin labelled Carl Uschen Winterthur, 1951, another long-termer in this auction. I think it's gradually going down. Quite a nice scroll, to be fair, but nothing super exciting. German violin labelled Stradivarius. Once again, we're just in the realms of kind of whatever late 19th, early 20th century, just generic stuff, I would think. Modern French violin labelled Grandini Paris. So 357 length of back. Not sure if we've seen this one before, but yeah, it just looks fairly standard. 100 to 150,000 yen there. German violin labelled August Derschmidt. Much of the same. Another trade violin there. Modern violin labelled JB Viome. Pretty sure we've seen this one before as well. Slightly more interesting than some of the other stuff, 120 to 150,000 yen. I think the price is gradually coming down over time, so it will sell eventually. Contemporary violin, possibly Italian, labelled Roberto della Grata, Facite in Lucca. So I can't remember if some of these ones were actually listed before as being Italian, because they did have some before, I can't quite remember. 120 to 180,000 yen. German violin labelled JB Violin. Looks fairly standard as well. Yeah, this has been here before. 130 to 180,000 yen. Contemporary violin labelled Capulan Michele Cremona anno 1996. 150 to 180,000 yen. I think this one we've seen before as well. Modern French violin Claudeau School. We've definitely seen this before with a Briggs Glasgow label. This is actually like a nice enough violin. Actually, I don't have any issue with this at all. I actually think this is quite nice. Price I think is coming down as well, 250 to 350,000 yen there, so it's getting onto the believable point. 360 length the back, so that might become viable at some point. Modern English violin labelled Paul Bailly. Once again, one of the nicer instruments. Actually, like really nice back in this instrument. Still think it's possibly not really nice scroll actually as well, to be fair. 500 to 800,000 yen, so it's still, in my opinion, a little bit high on the price, but maybe one to watch out. Then final one, an Italian violin ascribed to Vincenzo Sannino. I think an extra N there in the description. Napoli circa 1900. Yeah, I mean, interesting violin, to be honest. Really actually quite like the varnish in the back of the scroll there. Quite a nice instrument, but this is, we're getting to this is your 15 to kind of £16,000 estimate when you do the conversion. Quite a lot of money, to be honest, but an interesting one for sure. Once again, definitely one to look out for in the future, see if that price goes down a bit. And that is basically it. That is the whole Sunrise auction. I'll be honest, a bit disappointed. I would have hoped they'd got some more different things in of a higher level. This is all pretty not very nice, or just the same old stuff we've seen before, but anyway, it is what it is. Let's hope the next one's a bit better. Put a link in the description as always. Check it out, see what you think. If you've got any comments or think I'm being unfair about this auction, then please let me know. But otherwise, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye.